Super Aguri were only around for a relatively brief amount of time in Formula 1 before leaving the sport in rather abrupt fashion. The Japanese team, in truth, provided few memorable moments in the short time they were in F1, but nonetheless, they still managed to compete in the pinnacle of racing. So what happened to Super Aguri and why did they eventually pull out? Honda had bought out BAR in September 2005 and had already announced that Rubens Barrichello would be replacing Takuma Sato in 2006. As Sato was hugely popular in Japan, the Japanese public demanded that Sato be placed into another F1 team next season. So with this in mind and Sato's massive marketing value, Super Aguri was created by founder Aguri Suzuki, and the team would be a junior outfit for Honda of sorts without getting the official recognition of being so. The team had registered for F1 late in 2005, but was not approved by the time the official entry list for the 2006 season came out, as the team did not pay the entry bond. Super Aguri applied again with the money now in place. This time, the other 10 teams had to approve the entry, which is exactly what ended up happening in late January 2006. Aguri had the idea of having an all-Japanese lineup in order to promote the country's motorsporting talent, so they opted for the lineup of first driver Takuma Sato and second driver Yuji Ide, which was a very puzzling acquisition considering he was 31 and was not exactly outstanding even in F3 categories, but he had a long association with Suzuki, so that probably explains the signing for the 2006 season. To say that the team were already behind was an understatement, especially considering the fact that the chassis was that of a slightly updated version of the 2002 Arrows car and was only updated so it could meet current regulations. I guess it was fitting that they used the old Arrow chassis, as they were based literally in the same factory as the extinct team in Oxfordshire. Once the season started, Super Aguri definitely were the perennial backmarkers. The team really didn't get any attention until the San Marino Grand Prix, where Yuji Ide blatantly took out the Midland of Christian Albers. Ide would be replaced by French driver Franck Montagny soon after. Even if Ide didn't lose his seat, he would have been ousted anyways, as he lost his super license on the 10th of May 2006. He was on average a couple of seconds slower than Sato anyways, so it surely couldn't get any worse for Super Aguri. Montagny improved the team as he was a lot closer to Sato in performance, although it did take him a couple of weekends to get accustomed to his new settings. Overall, however, Super Aguri was still easily the worst team on the grid, and results more or less were the same as the season went on. After race 11, Montagny was demoted to third driver in place of Sakon Yamamoto. Not much changed immediately from the signing, but the new chassis the team installed at the back end of the season got them a lot closer to the likes of Toro Rosso and Midlands, and were either matching or even at times exceeding the pace of the Midland Spiker cars at the end of the season, which is where the team achieved its best finish of the season with 10th at the final race of the season at Interlagos with Sato, who beat out some decent midfield runners. Super Aguri went pointless in 2006 and were plumb last in the constructors. The off-season heading towards 2007 once again had its issues, where some rival teams were disputing Super Aguri over using parts designed from Honda, which was against the Concord Agreement rules of not being allowed to use parts designed by another constructor. But the team bypassed this, as a third party modified the parts after Super Aguri bought those original parts from its parent team in Honda. Another headache for the team was when Guido van der Garde was appointed as test and reserve driver in December 2006, only for him to leave unexpectedly and sign for Spiker as the test and reserve driver in February 2007. Super Aguri challenged this in the courts privately, but seemingly failed, as van der Garde would appear in a test at Silverstone for Spiker later in the year. And if that wasn't enough issues for the Japanese team, their car would also fail a crash test, as they were about to reveal the car to launch the season, delaying that launch by a couple of days. With all that mayhem out of sight, Super Aguri did manage to start the season out relatively well, as the cars were able to keep up with the lower end of the midfield, especially in qualifying, where both Sato and new driver Anthony Davidson, who came from Honda being their third driver previously, would often get into Q2 of qualifying, and Sato even made a Q3 appearance in the opening race in Australia. However, Super Aguri had to wait until the Spanish Grand Prix to secure their first ever points via an 8th place finish for Sato. 2 races later at the Canadian Grand Prix would turn out to be Super Aguri's peak, where Sato put in an inspired drive to finish 6th, where in the process he overtook Ralf Schumacher and then reigning world champion Fernando Alonso in the closing stages. It could have been even better too if not for a botched Sato pit stop earlier in the race, and if Davidson had not hit a groundhog of all things, which ruined his race while running as high as 3rd. This would be as good as it gets for Super Aguri, as the team would not score points ever again, and a dip in performance ensued, coinciding with their sponsor, a very sketchy oil company called SS United Group Oil and Gas Company, pulled out of the sponsorship agreement, having not paid most of their due funds, causing staff cutting of as many as 30 employees. Super Aguri did finish ahead of Spiker and even McLaren thanks to Spygate in 9th for the Constructors' Championship, with Takuma Sato scoring all 4 points. Super Aguri were however as high as 7th for part of the season. Super Aguri's crippling finances into the 2008 season meant that buyers were lining up for a potential purchase, including eventual HRT founder Adrian Campos. On track, and both Sato and Davidson would both be perennial backmarkers as Super Aguri were in 2006 and even needed funding from Bernie Ecclestone to compete in the 4th race in Spain. The team were denied entry into the Turkish Grand Prix the following fortnight by Honda CEO Nick Frey, as Super Aguri had amassed debt to well over $100 million, this coming at the worst time as well, as this was during the global financial crisis. The Magna Group and German magnate Franz Josef Weigel looked to be the most serious potential buyers at the time, but all negotiations fell short. Super Aguri was dead on the 7th of May 2008 as they had gone into administration. Most of the team's assets were sold to Franz Hilmer of Formtech Group. Hilmer would later try to apply and enter the 2010 F1 Championship under the Brabham name, but were denied entry. In conclusion, Super Aguri were a bit of a throwback team in the sense that they operated on a tiny budget as many teams did back in the 80s and 90s, and just like most of these teams, would not last long in the sport with limited finances and a lot of legal and operations issues along the way. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this kind of content, like the video and comment your thoughts down below.